Hey,
Hey, good afternoon.
Stepsters!
I'm Lasya.
And I'm Kritika, and we're your trainers from Future Steps.
Today we'll be learning about perimeter and area of 2D shapes, and our shapes in specific.
Yep, so before we get started, I'm pretty sure a bunch of you guys are probably really confused right now, but don't worry, so is our Mr. Nonchalant. He's been confused his entire life, and we're gonna change Mr. Nonchalant to being this cool guy right here. So let's get started. Let me get that off screen. Okay, so first off, perimeter is basically just the boundary of a shape, and area is everything inside that boundary. So, to make it easier, let's think about our, let's say we have our backyard, and our backyard is fenced, right? There's a fence. So, that fence would be called our boundary, right? So that so let's take that as our perimeter. So the length of that boundary, or the sum of all the lengths of that boundary, is what our perimeter would be. And then everything inside, so all, all every inch inside of that boundary is going to be our area. So let's look at this. Okay, I did not mean to move that. Let's look at just our formula sheet for now. So in our formula sheet, we have different formulas of area and perimeter, and most of these we would say you might want to remember. So let's get started with some simple ones. So we have our triangle. So we know our triangle looks just like this. It's a triangle, and if we if we make a line from the middle of a triangle, it's going to look like two right triangles, right? This this middle line, we call this the height of the triangle. And then we have our base of the triangle, which is the long side at the bottom. So if I had to draw this, it would look something like this. So I have this as, okay, that was not a line. This is my nice triangle. So this is going to be my base, which we're going to mark as a B. And then if we draw a line downward from the middle, we make two right triangles. This line is called the height. And the other two lines are just the two other sides. So every time we're trying to find the area of a triangle, we're going to use this formula. Area is equal to base times height over 2. Or many of you guys would have looked at this as 1/2 base times height, which is the same thing. So pretty cool. And then perimeter is basically adding up all the sides. So like, for example, we call this 1, 2, and this is our side 3. Then our perimeter is just going to be the sum of all the sides. Or, okay, don't, that just looks confusing. I wrote 3 before 2. It doesn't matter which way you add it, because addition wouldn't really. Okay, there you go. So that is our perimeter. Our perimeter is just the sum of all sides, which is pretty simple, isn't it? But sometimes people would ask you to find a side, and you can also use the perimeter to do that. So pretty cool. And then we also have all these other formulas. In these, the main ones that are used a lot is the triangle. That does not look like a star, but okay. The rectangle, the square is probably the simplest, and the circle is also a really important one. Though the square and the rectangle is really easy. That's just for the area of both of them, it's just length times width, and since the square has the same side length, it's just gonna be the side length squared. And another one that people that shows up a lot is trapezoid and parallelogram. So rhombus doesn't really show up that much, but it's good to always remember all of these. So keep that in mind. And now that you know all these formulas and oh wait, let me go into the circle because circles are a little different than everything else. In everything else we're like base times height or length times width, right? But circles have something called a radius and they don't really have edges, right? They're just one simple line that's in a shape of a circle, right? So in our circle, let me try drawing this if this will let me. Okay. So let's say this is my circle and this is my radius, right? So to find our area, always remember this formula. Our area is always going to be pi r squared. And our perimeter, which in a circle we call that our circumference, which is basically if you look at this circle, if I start from here and end over here, if I had to roll this out, it'll look like a line, right? That line's length is what we're trying to find. And this is what we called our circumference. Circumference. Not readable, but you guys know what I mean, right? And the formula for this is 2 pi r, and notice how 2 times r is just going to give you the diameter, right? Which is this whole length. So you can also write this as pi d. Okay, don't question my writing skills. Now we can move on to some questions.
Yeah. Now, like, if you look at these shapes, you're like wondering, oh my God, these are nothing similar to the figures we showed you before, right? But wait a minute. Let me just draw a line and I'll make it so familiar. Right? That's it. Now you have two rectangles that you can find to make your own area. Even the shape is so different. It looks like you've never seen it before. You can use lines like these to convert them into different shapes that you know how to find an area or perimeter for. So first, let's look at how we can find the perimeter for this, and then we'll look at how to find the area for it too. So you know that this is 8 meters, that's a given, but you don't know the length of this. But then you know the length of this and this. So you just subtract 11 minus 4 and you get 7 meters here. And then you know this is 27 meters and this is 11 meters. And you don't know the length of this, right? So you just subtract 27 minus 8, which is 19 meters. And you know the length of this. So for the perimeter, you don't need to include this line. You just need to add everything that's outside, right? Remember, it's the fencing of the garden, like Kritika said before. So here we just add 19 plus 4 plus 8 plus 7 plus 27 plus 11. And your answer is going to be 76 meters. Make sure you put your units in if the question does give you units. And in this question, we have units, right? It's meters. So make sure to include that. This is not the answer. 19 is not the answer. Let me just erase that. It's just the side of the length. 17 meters is the perimeter. Remember that. And now let's find the area. So area, what now that you know that these are two rectangles, right? Because we have 19 meters, 19 meters, 11 meters, 11 meters. This is 8 meters, 7 meters, 8 meters, 8 meters, 7 meters, right? You just find the area for this rectangle and the area for this rectangle, and you add them together to get your whole area of this whole shape. So first you say 8 times 7 plus 19 times 11, okay? And that will give you 265 meters squared. This is important too. In area, whenever they give you like, let's say it's meters, you put a square for it because it's an area and you're multiplying the sides together, right, to one another. And that's hence you will have a square for it. But for perimeter, it will just stay the same. And later, when you learn about volume and all of that, you will have a cube because you're using a three-dimensional shape and finding the whole area and the volume of it.
Okay, so now we're gonna do question number 2. So we're gonna use the same idea last year just talked about. We're gonna make a line, okay? And when we make a line, okay, that is not a straight line, but here. That is not a straight line either, but you get what I mean. So we have two rectangles now, once again. Same sort of imagination, so let's look at the side lengths. To find the side lengths, like last year said, we can just do, for this side we can have 16 minus 10, which will give us 6. Okay. And then for our other unknown side, we can do 25 minus 13, which should give us 12. And they're both in centimeters, but I don't have enough space to write that. But remember, you'll always need your units. So to find our perimeter, we're just going to add up all the sides. So we're going to do 6 plus 25 plus 16 plus 12 plus 10 plus 13, which should give us a perimeter of 82 centimeters. And then for our area, we're going to find two areas and we're going to add them up. So first we're going to find the area of rectangle 1 and then the area of rectangle 2. So the area of rectangle 1 would just be 13 times 6, right? Which is 78. So our total area should be the area of 1 plus the area of 2. And here we found the area of 1 to be 78. And the area of the second one would be 16 times 12, right? Which should be 192. And then all we have to do is add 192 and 78, which should give us 270. And the unit over here would be centimeter squared. And it's not meter squared because everything else is given in centimeters. And the reason why it's centimeters squared is because when you're finding area, you're multiplying two sides. So when you multiply two sides and you look at the units, it's almost like you're multiplying both the units too, which makes them unit squared.
Now let's look at the next question. So similar to the past two questions, we also draw a line for the area for finding the area much easier. First, let's find the perimeter. So we have 29, we have that, but we don't know the length of this. So for this, you just subtract 23 minus the 16, and that would be 7 meters. Sorry about that. That's not a good M, but yeah. And then we have 42 meters. We have 23 meters, but we don't know the length of this. So you just subtract 42 minus the 29, which is 13 meters. And then we have 16 meters and we have 29 meters. Now we just need to add all of them together. So it would be 29 plus 7 plus 42 plus a 22 plus a 13 plus a 16. And that would be giving you 130. So the perimeter is 130 meters. Don't forget the units. Now let's look at the area. And since we drew a line like before, we just have two shapes now. And for the first shape, it's 42 times a 7. Oh, no, 29 times a 7. Because 42 is the length of the whole thing, whereas 29 is just the length of this. And we're using it to find this rectangle here. So it's 29 times a 7. And then that would be 203 centimeters, right? And then we find the area of the other rectangle, which is 23 times a 13. And that would be 299. And you just add them together, with the answer being 502. and that's your area. And remember, it's going to be meters squared. That's your area.
Okay, now let's move on to question number 4. This one is pretty easy, right? It's just a plain rectangle, and with all the other exercises we just did, this one should be pretty simple. But a lot of people mess up when they're doing perimeter for this. So let me show you what people usually do for the perimeter. What they do is they add up the side lengths that are given to them, right? But wait a minute, just 66 doesn't seem right? Because what people end up doing is they only add 2 sides. But guess what? There are 2 more sides here. So we have to make sure for the perimeter that we add all of the side lengths. So we need to make sure we get the perimeter of the whole thing and not just half of it. So to do that, since it's a rectangle, we'll know that the side length here is also going to be 21 meters, and the side length here is going to be 45 meters. Now there are 2 ways you can do this. So let me cross this out. So the first way is you could just add everything up. 45 plus 45 plus 21 plus 21. But another way, which I find easier, is all you have to do is 2 times 41 plus 45 plus 21, right? Because because 45 plus 21, as we said, was the perimeter of half of the rectangle. And if we just double it, shouldn't we get the whole rectangle? So I find this way easier. So this would just be 66 times 2, which will be 132 meters. And then we move on to area, which is pretty simple. All you have to do is multiply the 2 side lengths. So the area is going to be 45 times 21, which should give you, it's a huge number, guys, 945 meters squared. So anything with area is always meters squared and not just meters. So, and it doesn't just have to be meters, it could be any unit. So it could be centimeters squared, meters squared, feet squared, or anything at all, right? So pretty cool with that. Small summary, we know perimeter is the boundary, area is everything inside the boundary, easy way to remember it. These are the formulas, you guys. And we talked about how circle has a different formula than the rest of the stuff. And this dancing guy here is pointing directly at the sheet, so you guys better remember the sheet is important.
Yep. And that's it for today's video.
See you in our next video then. Goodbye.
Bye, Stepsters.